This episode is sponsored by the IoT job site, the world's only dedicated space for applying for and advertising IoT vacancies across the world. Register now for job alerts or get in touch via let's talk at theiotjobsite.com.
Hello and welcome to the IoT podcast. I'm your host for today, Brad King-Taylor. I'm the head of embedded IoT for Paratus People in the UK. Today I am delighted to welcome from Wyld Networks Eric Hewitson, who is the SVP of Business Development and Strategy. Eric, welcome.
Thank you very much.
How are you today?
I'm very well, great to be here.
It's good to have you. Normally we have to do this on Teams or something like that, so it's nice to have, well, we had a conversation before we went on air, didn't we, about the dreaded, so it's nice to be able to do face-to-face again.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I'll tell you what, let's kick things straight off. So, can you introduce your background to IoT, give us a little bit of an insight into what Wyld Networks are, how you ended up in this crazy world, if you like?
Yeah, sure. So I probably come out of a SaaS business development sort of area originally. I joined Wyld in 2018. And yeah, that was my sort of first real entry into the world of the IoT.
Okay, perfect. And what did you do before Wyld?
So before Wyld, I was I worked with Fairfax Media.
Okay.
So I was working in sort of media properties, etc., that sort of thing. In the technical space still. And that was where I met one of our founders, Gene Myers.
Right. Okay.
We were working on something together in the transportation space with some technology he had, which has then developed into to what we are now. So yeah.
Perfect. And I suppose that leads us directly on to the next question, which would be good for the listeners, is to get a bit more of an understanding of who Wyld Networks are, what you do in brief, I suppose, is the easiest way.
Yep. So I guess the history of Wyld is that we come out of the utility space in the terrestrial kind of connectivity, LP1 connectivity for the Internet of Things. So originally we were doing LoRaWAN connectivity for utility metering, and we've got about 500,000 connected devices out in the world, or I should say, sort of, at least that have our firmware, our software. We have a software stack called TriOT, which connects LoRaWAN and wireless M-Bus.
Nice. Okay.
And that enabled us to enable our customers to solve some of the big problems they were having connecting their networks. And we did various other things in the sort of the IoT, terrestrial IoT space. And then a couple of years ago, we were partnered with Eutelsat.
Okay. Yeah.
Eutelsat are obviously looking to one of the world's big satellite providers, and they're putting up a low Earth orbiting network of satellites specifically to connect the Internet of Things.
Okay.
And get that global coverage.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of bounced straight on to where we were looking at. So obviously we're fast growing sector at the moment, coming out of a mad 2 years where with COVID and that sort of thing, it's all been quite quiet. And you mentioned a couple of things about connected devices, and I know the billions of IoT things globally at the moment, but cellular network only really covers 15% of the Earth's surface, which obviously you are well aware of. So it'd be good to get an understanding of how Wyld Networks are now solving that connectivity problems by using the terrestrial low orbit satellites and the network reach. So what is it that you're specifically working on?
Yeah, so I think the key to it for us is that we were looking at this world of LoRaWAN networks, LP1 networks that are out there. Lots of devices already connecting up. People setting up private networks. Some public LoRaWAN networks in some countries are doing that really well. Yeah. Some not doing it so well. And we thought, well, this is great, but is it ever going to get all the way across the globe? Is it ever going to solve those problems of I've got a farm in the Mato Grosso in Brazil that's probably never going to get cellular connectivity, or not for maybe not for a long time, or maybe never at all. Right across the world, whether it's agriculture, whether it's energy, whether it's environmental monitoring, these places that are remote, it's always going to be tricky to get that sort of data off. So I think that's what we were looking at, is how can we connect into that world where there is connection, where there are networks already, and then supplement that with the addition of connectivity via low Earth orbit satellites.
Yeah.
So what we've essentially done is created a LoRaWAN connectivity that will go to a terrestrial network, to a terrestrial gateway if it's available, and if not, it'll go to satellite. And in that way, you are giving yourself 100% connectivity, 100% global connectivity, right across land and oceans, and it kind of immediately solves that problem of how do I get data from those remote locations.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and I think one of the main, obviously one of the main things you're focused on, you've mentioned it a couple of times, is the low orbit satellites. One question is, you mentioned a couple of areas, agri-tech, that sort of thing. Is there a specific part of the technology world at the moment that is really, really benefiting from your technology at the moment? Is it agri-tech, for instance?
Well, I think there's a few sectors. There's agriculture. Definitely is probably the first and foremost one. And it's certainly the one I know most about as well, because it's the one I've been most involved with. But the energy sector too, and by that really I mean the infrastructure for energy. So the pipeline infrastructure, monitoring that, any assets that are in remote locations, and of course there's lots of that. And there's lots of sustainability questions around that. The logistics world as well. So moving goods and the classic example is the container as it goes on its long journey around the world, going in and out of forms of connectivity. How do we manage it when it's outside of the range of something, or where something fails, some other kind of network fails? How can you support that? And then I think that the fourth one would be utilities as well. So nice. I think that's still a really important space for us, and probably a fifth one actually would be environmental monitoring.
Perfect. Okay, so with everything that we've gone through so far, your technology, how it's used in agriculture and that sort of stuff, there's always going to be a couple of questions that is going to come from the listeners, going to come from the normal people. So affordability is going to be one of them. Yeah. It's always a key consideration when it comes to scalable solutions. So how are Wyld using these lower thought satellites to democratise data at the moment and spread that around? Yeah, I think
that's a great question. I think the first point is to look at what's actually happening prior to the advent of low Earth orbiting satellites. And the answer was that you could still get data from remote locations, but you're going to have to use VSAT, or you're going to have to use all of the solutions that you can potentially use. They're high power, they're high cost. The data is going to be high cost, and they come with a set of problems. They can be brilliant for solving certain things, especially if it's higher data rates, but they're not ideal for that sort of low data rate, that low data collection piece, which is where we think we can really add value to the world. So I think that idea of getting out to the whole world at low power and low cost. Well, the low power part is absolutely crucial. If you're going to try and measure soil moisture in a remote rural location, or you're checking pressure on a valve on a piece of pipeline that's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you don't want to have to supply the power to that. You want it to be sort of able to just lock it and leave it. It sends the data, you don't have to worry about it. So it's got to run on a couple of AA batteries or the equivalent to be able to do that. And that's the sort of world we're in. So we're not in the world of really high volumes of data. This is low volumes of data. What's the temperature? What's the time? Where am I located? And can I send that just every hour or every day or whatever it is? Soil moisture, you only need that sort of information once a day. That's plenty. In most cases.
Sometimes when you do target on something quite small, you gain a lot of information, right? So
exactly right.
And I think that's key. So moving on from the affordability side of things, you mentioned it a couple of times with just using a couple of AA batteries, for instance. So the other big area of focus at the moment with a lot of people is sustainability. It would be good to get more of an understanding on what Wyld are doing with their technology, because it's quite a large technology, focusing on a lot of areas. What are you doing at the moment to give sustainability to your customers?
Well, I think if we take the agricultural sector as a first point, by getting at the moment it's a highly undigitized space. I mean, there is very little data in a way. It's coming out of most sort of fields and most farms. It's hard to get data out of a farm. It's hard to get data out of soil. It's hard to get data out of plants. These are not easy things to do. There's a growing network of brilliant sensor manufacturers who are coming up with the most fantastic technologies, that can do these things, but
Yeah.
how do you get the data off them in across these great expanses of land? It's really tricky to do. It's really tricky to do that at low cost. So that's where we basically come in by getting access to that technology. I've completely lost what the question was. Sustainability, that's right. So I think there are three key things for agricultural sustainability.
Yeah.
The first is trying to reduce the amount of inputs you're putting in.
Yes.
So can I reduce the amount of water I'm putting in, which water is this terribly valuable commodity right across the world, but particularly in certain parts of the world where it's really crucial. Can I reduce the fertilizer, reduce the pesticides, these sorts of things?
Yeah.
Can I increase my yield? By better timing, better use of the inputs that I'm putting in, and obviously, can I then add quality to the environment, quality to the living environment around that by doing those things? If I know what's going on, it's always going to be a lot easier to do that.
Yeah, which is brilliant. I think just from touching on what you've mentioned a couple of times, I think the way that Wyld are tackling affordability, tackling sustainability, I think you're doing some very impressive stuff. Now, obviously, it's not always green, so I'd be keen to get a bit of an understanding of, obviously, like I said, what you're doing is you're achieving some fantastic things at the moment. What are the challenges that you've come across as a company, and have you managed to tackle them all, or are you still trying to work against certain aspects of difficulties, if you like? Yeah,
well, I think probably our biggest challenge over the last couple of years has been how do we manage power? Okay. So I mean, I've talked about yes, we've got it down to this really low power situation, and that's of course because of the wonderful nature of LoRaWAN in the first place, being this low energy RF solution. But we've also developed a beaconing system with Eutelsat, so we're able to sort of wake up our devices at the point when they need to send the device, because the low Earth orbit satellite is rotating around the Earth. You have to wait for it to come overhead before you can send something to it, but you don't want to be doing that all the time pointlessly. So we've developed a beaconing system for that, which is dramatically changed how we can manage the power in the devices. So I think that's an ongoing challenge. It's something we've mastered, but it's going to be an ongoing challenge to continue to be able to provide that low power resource.
Yeah, superb. And I think power does come into a lot of companies' challenges. So I mean, it's brilliant to hear that you're looking at these challenges and you're tackling them head on. You've come up with something quite brilliant to counteract that. What's next for Wyld? What's next in terms of the technology that you're using? Partnerships, you've mentioned a couple of times your partnerships that seem to be overcoming a lot of the stuff you're doing. So yeah, it'd just be good to understand, with you facing those challenges and overcoming them, what's next? Where can this technology go?
Well, I think the key for Wyld is we're connectivity specialists. So what we're doing is we're focusing on that connectivity piece. There's a whole world of sensor manufacturers out there. We can never be all of those sensors. So we do have a few sensors that we build ourselves, but there's literally tens of thousands. So it's how do we get into all of those sensors to enable all of those companies to be able to access their data from these new locations and get themselves new markets and digitize industries in a way that they just haven't been able to do before. And the only way really for us to do that is to embed our technology into those sensors. So that's what we're really focused on at the moment, is getting our module embedded into the sensors of manufacturers. It's a challenge, definitely. Yeah. But it's going to provide tremendous new market opportunity for our customers if they do that.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on it. There are billions of connected devices, but there's never been a straightforward way to connect them all. I mean, you start hearing about different technologies like edge computing and that sort of thing coming in to try and branch that out. So, what is next? Is there anything in the pipeline you might be able to share or not share?
Well, one thing I haven't really talked about is the data side of things, and I think that's really important. So what happens to the data when it's collected by the satellite? Well, it comes back down to Earth. It comes in through our software platform called Wyld Fusion.
Okay.
So we manage the data there, and from there, push data out to wherever our customers want it. We're also not a 1,000 different types of analytics platform for all these different industries out there. We can't be that. There are lots of people who are specialising in lots of different areas that do that. In the areas we've discussed, agriculture, energy, etc. They'll have their own ways of wanting it. They just need the data. So we're just providing them this. So Wyld Fusion will provide that data to them really, really, really easily. And I think the other part is the data is low cost. It's not going to be high cost data. In terms of things we're working on at the moment, I mean a couple of examples. We're working with Bayer. In the USA, we're doing
brilliant. Yeah.
We're doing a wonderful project with them in the pollination sector. So getting data from beehives. We've built a lid sensor for a beehive, and we're combining that with other sensor data that they've got: hive weight, hive temperature, and humidity, and all of that data going up via satellite.
Okay.
And then back into their platform so that they can analyse and use that. I mean, that's one example, but we're working in the energy sector. I can't really speak about too much.
It's fine. We get it all the time on the podcast. They want to say something, but then they stop and actually, I better not.
but we've got something like 30 or 40 trials that have either started already or running already. We'll have a full commercial service in the second half of this year.
You're growing quite quickly then, by the sounds of it. I mean, the partnership with Bayer alone is huge. Massive congratulations on that, because they are a great company. So, is there anything else you want to add on anything that we've touched on so far? Anything in particular that you want to mention that's not been brought up yet?
No, I think that's I think that there's a lot of excitement in the IoT space. There has been for a long time, but I think we are now at that sort of point where the connection between the ability to get data, the sensors being built, and the desire in the market to get that data from the field, from wherever they're working from, has really got to, they're matching beautifully at the moment, and I think it's just it's an explosive time in the IoT world.
It really is an explosive time in the IoT world. I'm glad you said that, because it links really well to the next part. So one thing that we do is we ask our previous guests to put across a question to you, and he would like to ask you, Eric, from your perspective, how has the competition in IoT in the industry you serve changed over the past few years that you've been in it?
Well, I think there's been a big change from our perspective. Obviously, is the fact that there is now the capability to get data from the world via satellite at low cost and at low power, and that really is a game changing, I think, for the IoT world. It's 2 years ago there were lots of new technologies coming on board, but there was this frustration of I've got to support a local area network. I've got to have a gateway. I've got to make sure it doesn't fall over. This, that, and when you go directly from the sensor straight to a satellite, you sort of solve that problem. And I think that's what's really the big change that's happened. It's been happening for the last year and a half, with ourselves and others, and I think that's really going to dramatically change things over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's coming in that's going to dramatically change everything. Of 5G is going to change the whole world. I think the metaverse obviously is talked about. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of technologies that I think is going to change everything. But I think the very exciting thing is, as you touched on it, is most of the time when a company hits a challenge or something comes up, something can be brought out or developed or worked on to overcome the challenges. Yeah, it's just how long are the time scales? Yeah, have we got the manpower? Have we got the money to do it all? So, brilliant. Eric, look, it's been fantastic. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, if there's anything else you want to add, we will be getting a question from you for the next guest. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us, and in person as well. How long did it take you to get here?
It took me an hour and a half from London. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you all, and really appreciate it. And thanks very much for having Wyld on your.
No, absolute pleasure. Podcast. I'm sure there'll be
which we love, by the way.
There'll be a future. Wow. Thank you very much, because before we went on, you were mentioning how you actually listen to the podcast and everything as well. So it's good to hear. I think it's doing a lot and that's what
it's
we
great
want
for the
you guys.
community, and we need it's exactly what we need.
Yeah, and that's why you're here, because I think what Wyld are up to at the moment is superb, and I think it's going to change a lot of life. I mean, we do have an agri-tech team, and they're speaking to companies all the time that have got specific challenges, with connectivity being one. So, yeah, I think you're onto the right thing. So thank you so much. Where can we find out more about Wyld? Where can we find out more about yourself? You've got socials and...
Yeah, absolutely. So wyldnetworks.com is the first stop. That's our website. And we're on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube. So at Wyld Networks. Put in Wyld Networks on YouTube. You should see a few videos.
Perfect. Pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
And until next time.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Guys, please make sure you subscribe to the IoT podcast. Please leave a comment and a like. It will give us the best opportunity to supply the content you love. I don't care how you're connected, as long as you're connected. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.